All
here
right.
we
Well,
are, better late than never.
my apologies. It was all my fault. We've been
Well,
on the road for a couple of days, and boy, I'll tell you, it's been an adventure. But with getting set up, we're at a friend's place. We just finished up supper, so I wasn't able to get on here as fast as I otherwise would. So it's not Joseph's fault; it's mine.
well, we'll blame it on technology.
Yeah, that works. We'll go with that technology. Okay.
Technology it is.
Well, we left Sioux Lookout a couple days. When yesterday afternoon around 4, with all of our worldly possessions packed in the back of our truck and our trailer, and talk about purge. Oh my God, because we're striking out on a new adventure. So, um, Allison started an Instagram page or a platform, and I've joined her on it. So if you want to get an inkling into what we're up to, you can always follow us on Instagram at Navigate Summer Song, I think is what it's called. So anyway, we'll talk more about that later. But it's been a wild ride, I'll tell you. We had got a chance to stop at an old grain elevator. You know that the old ones that kind of get skinny towards the top with a pitched roof, and there
Sure.
used to be thousands of them scattered across the prairies. There's not many left. So when we saw one, my wife, who loves that kind of stuff, we pulled over and took some pictures of it, got inside it, and had a look around. And it's an amazing piece of technology considering how old it is. And they still have some of them around. The modern ones don't look anything like that, not by a long shot. So it was an interesting day. And now we're at Friend's Place here in Coppell, Saskatchewan, on our way to Vancouver. So it's going to be an interesting trip, that's for sure. But the nice thing about doing it this way is we're breaking the trip up so it's not one long drive, because this country, if you want to know how big it is, just try driving across it.
Well, from the east coast to the west coast, and by the way, that only covers the east north, or sorry, the east to west. That doesn't cover up north, which
Oh,
itself
yeah,
is
that's right.
thousands of miles from the border. Um, uh, you're looking at just if you're doing a casual drive, and by casual drive I mean 6, 7, 8 hours a day, you're looking at least a week. You could cut that down to five, maybe 5 days, but that's hard driving 12 hours a day.
It is. It is. And you know what? It's too big a country, and because we don't really have a set schedule. It's the kind of thing where we can take our time. We've got our dog with us, and she's been a wonderful um, travel companion. I don't think I could ask for a better behaved dog to travel across the country with. And we're just taking it easy. And we want to stop somewhere, we stop. When we get going again, we get going again. So
Absolutely.
it's I think it's the right way to go across, because you can really soak it in, and we're keeping track of everything that we're doing. And I do a daily log entry, which I haven't done in a couple of days, which I got to get caught up on. So when we look back on it, we can remember the different points that may or may not get not swept under the carpet, but forgotten, as the trip goes along. So all kinds of fun stuff. So
Sure.
that's all about me. What's going on with you? I haven't talked to you since last week.
Well, Nick, the world is going crazy. That's
Yes,
all I can
dude.
say. There's no shortage of items to discuss, whether it's on the Nick and Joe show, or it's on the Joseph Benamy show, or what have you. Um, uh, I as a religious man, I take great comfort in the knowledge that the world is unfolding exactly the way it's planned to unfold.
Hmm.
And every now and then, I scratch my head and go, I just don't understand this.
The
But
nice part is you
here's
don't
the
have
thing,
to.
Nick. It's we have an obligation to do our best. Our job is not to fix the world. Our job is to live in it according to our principles and the way we're raised, the way we're taught. And then basically leave it up to the good Lord to sort everything else out. And hopefully, when we're doing our job, we're not screwing things up too much.
Well, you remember that old Navy saying, right? It's not our job to reason why; it's just our job job to do and die, which is pretty
Which is
much
a
what you
poem.
just said. What's
That,
that?
that's a poem, I gee, I
I'd never heard any more than 2 lines of it then.
yeah, no, it's part of it's from a poem, and I'm just trying to think of who wrote the poem. Um,
It's
uh,
not the it's
it's
not the same guy who wrote the one about being the train conductor. It's not my job
no,
the one where you ring the bell, but let this damn thing jump the tracks and see who catches the
yeah,
tail.
no,
That's the
it was a poem written about the charge of the
the
Light
Light Brigade.
Brigade in the Crimean War.
That was Have you ever studied that particular charge?
Well, I know a little bit about the war.
They went the wrong way.
Okay, I don't know.
They did. They went the wrong way. They charged the wrong way.
Well,
They weren't
whether they
supposed to
charged
charge
the
into
right
the
way or the
valley.
wrong way, that was the last real cavalry charge of the. Well, I
Crimean.
don't know actually if it actually was, because I do know that there was some cavalry action in Sudan towards the end of the century of the 19th century, and I'm not mistaken, but there may have been some cavalry action in South Africa during the Boer War.
There was, and there was also cavalry action during World War One. One of
Well,
which won us a Victoria Cross. Lieutenant Flowerdew led his troop of dragoons, and in those days they weren't tanks; they were horses, against a German fortified position. He suffered 70% casualties in the charge, but encouraged his men to carry on, and they routed the enemy in the position. And he got shot through both thighs and died the following day.
right.
So it's a posthumous VC, which is the way most people get them. But that was one of the last cavalry charges.
So, Nick, uh, okay, well, you know what? We would normally go for a break, but we're going to skip our first break tonight because
Yeah.
we started a little late.
Yep.
So this is as good a time as any to say, what's up with those Maple Leafs? I mean, really, you can't. Come on, man. How
You've been
am I
predicting
supposed to
doom and
react to them
gloom.
actually doing what they're supposed to do? That is to say, winning a playoff series.
You've been predicting doom and gloom for months.
I haven't been predicting anything. I've merely been stating what the record shows.
Doesn't matter. The record only matters until the day after.
So, first playoff series that they have won in 19 years.
Since 2004.
Since 2004.
That's right. And I couldn't see it because I was on the road, but I listened to it. Now, I don't know if you know who Joe Bowen and Jim Taddy are. They are the voice of the Leafs on the radio. And they're two of the best broadcasters when it comes to describing a game and the interaction between them, explaining and painting that mental picture so you can see the game in your mind. And he's absolutely a homie. There's no excuse. There's no denying it. He's a huge Leaf fan. Joe Bowen, Jim Ralph is also a big, although he's kind of like you and I. Like Joe Bowen will get bouncing in his chair, and Jim Taddy is kind of calming him down, right? So it'd be like you and me calling a hockey game, and you're going, now, don't forget, there's this and that, and I'm just coming out of my chair. But oh my God, I said that when it was tied 1-1 going in the third period, we got down to about 2 or 3 minutes left, and I said to my wife, I said, if Toronto scores, you think I scream. Wait till you hear this guy. So sure enough, they scored, and Bowen lost his mind. And my wife looked at me and she said, I have no idea anybody could get that excited. I said, you don't know Joe Bowen. So it was finally to get that monkey off their back. And now who knows what's going to happen. But I think they've made a statement. And bring them on. And one of the people I watch is a guy called Steve Dangle, who does a video blog called LFR. And he's been doing it for 16 years. And when somebody said, who would you rather have going into the next round? Would you want Florida or do you want Boston? And he said, we want the best. We want to beat whoever has earned it. And I thought, what a brilliant answer. They don't have a preference. They don't care because they beat that monster. They were the best in that series. And now they think they can beat anybody. So it doesn't matter who the next person down the line is. So if they get through this round, they're playing for Lord Stanley because there's only 8 games
there's only 3 rounds?
3? Or am I thinking 3, then the Stanley Cup?
I don't know.
Because there's 8 teams left, or there
Okay,
will be. I
so
don't because Edmonton won last night too, so they put the Kings out.
okay, so just let me think for a second. So you have this is not the conference championship that they're playing now.
No,
Okay,
not
so
yet.
yeah, there are 3 rounds left.
Okay, that's right.
You
Because
have to win
no,
4 rounds to
you have
win the
the
Stanley Cup.
Islanders, the Rangers, and the Islanders, or was it the Islanders playing? There's there's another set of teams out there that are still playing.
Okay,
There is a chance, a theoretical chance, but a chance that we could see an all Canadian Stanley Cup.
that'd be interesting.
Edmonton against Toronto.
I don't know when the last time that we had an all Canadian Stanley
I
Cup
don't know.
was.
Now it would be bad for the NHL viewership because most of the teams are in the States. But from a Canadian perspective, oh my God, the country would come unglued.
It would be interesting, that's for sure.
So yes, this is the best part of hockey season. All year long, we've been waiting for this moment. They finally slayed that dragon, and now it's time to move on. So we'll see who they play. And frankly, I think Steve Dangle is absolutely right. It doesn't matter.
Well, of course it doesn't matter. You look, at some point in time, you're going to play the best teams out there, presumably. At least the best teams today. That's the thing that people have to remember about this is it's not the best team during the regular season.
Nope.
It's not the best team for the first part of the season. It's the best team at this particular point in time. So yeah, and that's kind of what makes sports interesting because frankly you just never know, as they say in football, at least in the United States where almost all professional football games are played on Sundays. Any given Sunday, one team can beat another team. The
That's true
best
in the
team can
NHL.
beat the worst team can beat the best team on any given Sunday because
And that's true in the
it all
NHL as well.
depends.
Yep. So it's been a great season. There have been ups and downs for every team. Even Ottawa came on at the end. And as much as I'm no Ottawa Senators fan, they have a good foundation for next year. And it'll be interesting to see a revival of that challenge of Ontario between Toronto and Ottawa. It doesn't matter what side of the cushion you sit on. Um, if you get home games in either city with those two teams playing, it's going to mean something. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch next year because obviously, if Toronto goes deep into these playoffs, they are going to be a tiger to deal with next year.
Well, Nick, I don't know whether you realize this or not, but when it comes to the Maple Leafs playing the Senators, there is no Senators
That's
home
true.
home
That
ice
is true.
advantage.
Yeah, my old colleague Lowell Green used to lament that, and I remember when I was first on terrestrial radio, he was going on and on and on, but all these Leaf fans filling the Palladium, right? And I went on my Saturday evening show, and I was as if he was listening. I said, Lowell, what difference does it make who they cheer for? They're buying the parking, they're buying the tickets, they're buying the beer, they're buying the pizza, they're sitting in the seat
Oh, sure.
doing exactly what you want them to do.
From a business point of view, you're
Precisely.
absolutely
Well, it's a
correct.
business.
Okay, well, yeah, well, you see, but pure hockey fans don't look at it as a business.
I'm
Okay.
just saying that stop giving people grief about who they cheer for and just be glad they're in the stadium.
Well, but this is, you're interesting that you've raised this point, Nick, because this has been a thorn in my side for quite some time. I have to tell you, and that is that the quality of Ottawa sports fans. I know that there are going to be people who are going to listen to this and they're going to go, "Oh, there's that Benham, he's whining and complaining again." But isn't that really what Ottawa sports fans do? Is they whine and complain a lot about things?
Yeah.
We've had some pretty great teams. We've had some pretty crappy teams as well. But if you're a real sports fan, you come out and you watch the game, and you appreciate the sport and you appreciate the competition, and you'd like to see your team win. And maybe you'll come out more often if your team is winning more often. But you're not afraid to come out and watch the play anyway, even if your team is not winning so much. And a lot of sports, people take that attitude. You're not going to find soccer fields, soccer stadiums, or rugby stadiums in Europe, in the UK, half empty because the team isn't playing that well. People come out and they love the sport and they love to have their team win, but first and foremost, they love the sport. And that's what a true fan is. But we don't have a lot of that in Ottawa for some reason. And over the years, I've heard a lot of explanations as to why people think that is. For instance, Ottawa is a bit of a transient town, so why would you come out if you're a Saskatchewan Roughriders fan to watch the Ottawa Red Blacks? I had to stop and think of what the team's name is these days.
I like the
Okay,
Renegades myself.
but there is an element of that, and the reaction, the reaction of people who are in the marketing for these teams typically has been to do what Lowell used to do, and that is to whine and complain and basically say, don't you want to get behind your team? Get behind your team, etc. And I have to tell you, as a rabid football fan at one point in time in my life, and as a great hockey fan as well. But it never bothered. I was a Montreal Canadiens fan. I still am.
Very much so.
But with football, I was an old Ottawa Rough Riders fan. And I mean, I loved football. I loved Canadian football. I loved watching the Rough Riders. We'd go to games on weekends. We'd catch them on the radio. I remember as a kid, we'd be driving down the road on a Sunday afternoon drive or going to see relatives or something like that, Nick. And there'd be a game on the radio. And, I'd always say to my parents, turn the football game on. Let's listen to the football game. So we'd be the whole family, be in the car, and we'd be driving around, and we'd be listening to the football game on CFRA. Ernie Kelkin, Dave Schreiber. I'm sure you knew Dave Schreiber from your days at CFRA. So, I mean, it brings back a lot. But the thing was, when they started to have problems, okay, and the fan base started to fall down a little bit, all of a sudden, the only thing we would hear is complaining. If you have to save the football team, you have to save the Rough Riders and that. And it got to the point where I was just thinking, okay, this is just nothing but an annual bag-a-thon. Okay, just play football. Play football. Give me an entertaining week or an entertaining afternoon, and I'm going to come back. And I'm going to come back whether you win or lose, as long as the product on the field is decent. I walk away having paid my money for the ticket, feeling that I got some value, some entertainment value for the money I spent. But instead, they made it an obligation. Somehow or other, I'm letting the team down. I'm going, look. That's like telling me I'm letting Tom Cruise down because I didn't go to the theater to watch Maverick.
Yeah, that's backwards because you didn't let the team down. Team let you down by putting a crappy product on the field. And I was going to make the same movie analogy that you just did about the idea that, look, you pay your money when you buy your ticket to go see a movie. It could be a piece of junk, but it could be the most entertaining thing you've seen all day. It's a roll of the dice.
Sure. And, to go to a movie is not like going to a hockey game or going to a football game nowadays. Right. I mean, there's just no comparison in terms of costs involved and comfort. You go to a football game. Last football game I went to was a playoff game between Ottawa and I think it was Edmonton, because it was one of those crossover games.
Yeah.
When the last time Ottawa played in the Grey Cup and won the Grey Cup. Remember, we had a Grey Cup party at the Legion on Kent Street, if you'll recall. Well, the week before, my son and I had gone to that football game, and I got to tell you, it was in Ottawa, and I have to tell you, it was miserable. Okay, it was like hovering around -1, -2 degrees, maybe a little colder, coming down wet snow, windy. The field was covered in snow. They had to shovel off every now and then on the 5-yard lines and stuff like that, so that people would know where they were on the field and that. And I swear, for the second half of that game, I did not sit down once. I was standing, stomping my feet and that. But it was a great game. It was a great product, and I came away from that, and I felt like I got my money's worth, no matter how miserable it was.
Yeah, that was perfect Canadian football weather. This is what separates us from the Americans.
I for the life of me cannot understand indoor football. And I'm not talking about arena football. I'm talking about playing football in a stadium with a closed roof. I just don't get that. But
the whole point is it's an outdoor sport.
I think so. And, if people get cold, well, there it is.
There you go. No, look, I'm a fan of a lot of different sports, but I've really, as I was sharing with you, I think it was last weekend, I've really fallen in love again with hockey because of everything about it. The skill set's so high, and the caliber of the teams is so great. Like, you have people playing in the NHL now who could play almost any league they wanted to. Now, would they be the best soccer player out there? Maybe not. Could they play but
Well,
would they be the
they have
best
certain
NBA star?
skills. Every
Yeah,
sport has certain skills.
precisely. But a hockey player could be competent at any one of those games.
Maybe.
No, I think because the athleticism it takes, and they'd have to learn the finer points. But in general, these guys are highly conditioned, highly motivated, highly disciplined. What more do you want? This is what I don't understand about people who don't like hockey. What more do you want? Anyway,
Well, I'll tell you what I want. I want to take a break.
okay.
Okay. So we are going to be back in a couple minutes here on the Nick and Joe Show. Stay tuned.
Ice cream. Give me ice cream with whipped cream. Ice cream. Give me ice cream with whipped cream. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. That strawberry chocolate taste. High school vanilla for me. Hundreds and thousands. I need an ice cream island. Give me ice cream with whipped cream. Strawberry sauce. And see my face gleam. I need a wafer on top. Just ice cream full stop. So take me to the pudding shop. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. That strawberry chocolate taste.
There is just a feeling that this might be right for us, for you and me. There is just a look I think this might be right for us, for you and me. There is just a feeling that this might be right for us, for you and me. There is just a look I think this might.
All right. Welcome back. This is the Nick and Joe Show, the Traveling Road Show edition.
Yeah, and you know it's funny because I'm actually doing the show as I usually do from my home studio, but I decided I was being lazy tonight, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to flip on my computer, use my web camera, and forget about setting up the studio the way I normally would. So that's why I look a little bit different tonight, but yeah, call it a traveling road show. And you know, I have to tell you, Nick, it's just the change in technology to do this kind of a broadcast between today and say just even 5 years ago is nothing short of astonishing.
Yeah.
I almost used the term miraculous, but I'll probably just reserve that for real miracles. But
Yeah,
it's
let's leave it
just
at
so
that.
easy now to do this and to do a really good job and to communicate with people out there and get your ideas out.
Well, it's certainly something that a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon with. There are all kinds of vlogs out there and blogs out there and YouTube channels. And I mean, it's just wild the kind of technology um, that is available to the average person. Like, it doesn't cost, you don't have to spend $5 million buying a TV and radio station and get all the permits and abide by the rules of the CRTC and all that stuff and all the costs that come with it. And while I don't think terrestrial radio is going away anytime soon, it certainly is going through major changes.
Right.
Radio stations now are broadcasting to the whole world. Like I was listening to the Fan 1050 out of Toronto, which is where the Joe Bowen and Jim Ralph were broadcasting from. I'm literally halfway across the country, coming into Saskatchewan, listening to a game being played in Florida. So how is that possible?
And you're probably listening on the internet.
I was listening. As a matter of fact, there was an app, and I was listening to it over my phone as we drove.
Right. Which is exactly what we do.
Yeah.
Even terrestrial radio now is moving towards internet broadcasting, and
Well, that's my point. Yeah.
yeah,
Not
absolutely
only have they got the local market, but they also have a world stage to stand on.
right.
So I think that's a good thing. Now, the one thing that we were watching a commercial when I was watching the highlights later, or something like that, and an ad came up, and it was about BGC, and I looked at it. I said, "What the heck is BGC?"
BGC Ottawa.
Well, it was just
BGC?
BCE, and it was about young people, and Allison said, my wife said, that sounds like the Boys and Girls Club.
Right.
So we did a little research, and
That's exactly what it is.
That's exactly started back in not the last century that just went by, but the one before that in 1890s or so, for orphan boys who had no place to go. Then it morphed in 1927 to a full-fledged charity, and then in 1947 it changed again to allow the girls to participate in their own girls' clubs. And then in 1974 it changed again, and in 2021 they took the gender out of it. I'm sorry. Look, this woke stuff, I'm at the end of my rope with it. Who else but a boy or a girl is going to join this group? I mean, this idea that somehow you can wave a wand and change who you are at the most basic molecular level is beyond me. I just don't get it. When I saw that, and my wife and I were talking about this, and boy, I'll tell you, it got quite a conversation going, because we both think this is outrageous that they would take something as benign as the Boys and Girls Club. I mean, I don't care. Call it what it is. It's a Boys and Girls Club. Don't change it just because somebody in your marketing department thinks you have to be woke. Because as we're finding out, if you go woke, you go broke. And I can see a lot of people, if they do the kind of homework I did, would say, you know what, Johnny, and you know what, Susie, you're all done. You're not going back. And it's going to hurt them in the long run.
Well, I don't know. This a couple of things I have to say about this. First of all, I didn't get. I spent quite a bit of time this afternoon after you and I talked, Nick, on their website.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you that I didn't see anything really there. And frankly, I didn't go through everything, but I didn't see much there in terms of this whole gender fluidity thing. But I will say this, okay, just on that subject itself, I don't understand why you wouldn't use the terms boy and girl, because certainly if you're a boy and you want to become a girl, then why wouldn't you just call yourself a girl? In which case, it doesn't make sense to say we're not going to call the club the Boys and Girls Club anymore, because you still have boys and girls, even if you don't agree with the definition of what a boy or a girl is.
Right.
So to me, the whole thing just doesn't make sense, and it's kind of like we just want to avoid using the terms boy and girl because those terms have become controversial. And talk about change over the last 5 years. I mean,
no kidding.
It's just in that it's stupefying how quickly we have so many of the elites in our society, and I stress that because we're not talking about, I think, the rank and file of our society, the normal people out there. Okay, I mean, most people just don't think about this stuff, and when they think about it, they roll their eyes. But the elites, the so-called opinion makers, they really want to push this stuff, and it just doesn't make any sense on any kind of a level. But having said that, Nick, having said that, and this is really my problem with all of this stuff. There are moral arguments to make. There are theological arguments to make. There are all kinds of arguments to make about the woke stuff. But I think that what really gets under my skin, ultimately, what really gets under my skin is the fakeness of it. It's the factual wrongness of the things that are being pushed. And let me give you an example from the Boys and Girls Club website. As I was surfing through the website, I noticed that they had a lot of different pages that had to do with equity and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and I was reading through one of the pages that have to do with the use of land, recognition of land, not land claims, but I can't remember how they worded. I don't have the page open in front of me, but they got
I
into
know
the
the page you
whole
mean.
again about we acknowledge that our club facilities are built on unceded Algonquin land, and there was another tribe. I can't remember what it was exactly. It's not
Right.
important. What is important is that it was unceded Algonquin land and this other tribe, and then it went on to say about how that this has been Algonquin land for millennia. Millennia. I'm not talking about millennia Trump here. I'm talking about millennia as in plural 1,000-year bunches.
Right.
Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, okay, how do you know who controlled this land, who this land belonged to in terms of Aboriginal tribes 1,000 years ago, let alone multiple thousands of years ago? It is the thing is in people's rush to be inclusive, and I understand we want to be inclusive, we want to be fair, we want people to be able to participate. I don't see how, even if it was factually true, even if it was accurate, I don't see how making these kinds of statements, of virtue signaling statements, increase any kind of participation by anyone. Okay, I mean, I just if you happen to be of Algonquin First Nations ancestry, are you all of a sudden going to go, oh, I'm going to join the Boys and Girls Club because they recognize that this used to belong to my people, 200 years ago or whenever? Okay, all right. I understand the idea that you want to be inclusive and you want to you want to look out for some equity and stuff like that. I just don't see that it makes a difference to anybody. I don't see how anybody is making a decision to join or not join based on that. But even if there is, can we have some historical accuracy? There is absolutely no reason for anyone to make the statement that this was Algonquin territory for millennia. Now, maybe it was. Maybe it was. But I doubt it. Okay? But to make that as a factual statement that's the problem. The problem
Well,
is that you want to be inclusive, but you don't even know what you're including people in. And so
well, first,
it's false. You're making it up. It's a fiction. And
let me
for those of us who care about the truth and accuracy in our lives and in the world around us, I mean, for Pete's sakes, if you're going to live, you're living a fantasy.
Well, let me jump in here for a second, because when you're using the word inclusive, wouldn't it be inclusive if you allowed everybody to access the club without ever raising gender or heritage, and just include everybody with no notion of that in your head?
I,
Isn't
I
that the ultimate in inclusion?
well,
You see that?
I could not agree with you more on that, Nick. I mean, the very fact that you set definitions. Definitions
You're
are by their
exclusive.
very definition limiting. So
Yes.
don't have any definitions. Who cares?
So-
Boys and girls includes everybody.
That's my whole point. This idea of being inclusive. This, I think, is really what's at the heart of what just needles me about this, is they use this term inclusive in 100 different ways. It was never intended to be used, because if they understood it, they would know that the only way you can truly be inclusive is to turn a blind eye to everything but content of character, regardless of what you look like, where you come from, what your heritage is, who you sleep with. None of that stuff would matter, because it's a content of your character. You're inside the part that makes you a unique individual. That's what matters, not what color you are, not any of that other nonsense. That's being inclusive. What we're being shown is, they call it inclusive, but in fact, it is the most exclusive things, because now, if you don't have the right ratio, certain people can't get into, say, higher education institutions because they have a quota to make sure they're being inclusive. Well, you just excluded a whole group of people. How does that work?
Yeah, well, of course, you're absolutely right, and again, this falls into the category of what I've identified as being fantasy. It's a lie,
Yeah.
and so we're all living a lie, and we're celebrating the fact that we're living a lie because we feel good about ourselves in it. Now, in fairness, most people probably just don't think about this stuff, okay, like you and I do, or the
Right.
people who are pushing it. So for the overwhelming majority of people, this isn't an issue one way or the other. They just go along living their lives, and they shrug their shoulders and go, "Okay, more nonsense coming from the elites and the talking heads and stuff like that." But Nick, we're just gonna take a quick break. Okay, let's just take a quick break. Okay,
Okay.
we'll be back in less than a minute here on the Nick and Joe show.
Who says you can't turn the clock back? Experience the excitement of open-air flying and see Canada's National Capital Region like you've never seen it before from the open cockpit of a vintage 1930s biplane. Are you up for the adventure? Put on your helmet and goggles and strap yourself in. Book your flight today. Go to OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. That's OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. Ottawa Biplane Adventures. The adventure begins here.
Oh my gosh, that was so exciting! I gotta do it again.
Okay, welcome back. This is the Nick and Joe show. I'm Nick, he's Joe, he's there, and I'm here. And we'll just kind of leave it at that. It's the traveling show, although next week we should be settled in a much more permanent location. So with that said, something, this whole thing, look, we could go on and on and on about it, but ultimately what it comes down to is I think that you're right, that most average people don't waste any mental energy on this because they're so overwhelmed with just trying to get through the day. They face carbon taxes. They face, financial uncertainty. There's, all kinds of threats to their daily life out there they're trying to deal with, whether it's family problems or whether it's economic problems, whatever it is, or third world war from Ukraine, who knows? That this kind of stuff, I don't know how high up on the radar it comes when the old antenna goes around. It's like, remember the days in the military when it was only number 11 on people's concerns at budget time. I don't think it even rates that high now, but the point is that they just don't have the mental energy required to keep track of this stuff, which is why, by the way, what people like you and I do is so critical, because we can go through the garbage, sift out what's important, present it to people, and they can save themselves a whole bunch of time just by listening to us.
Okay, but I'm just going to push back on this just a teensy bit, Nick.
Be my guest.
I actually don't think it's because people are overwhelmed. Okay, there are issues
They're
out there.
apathetic.
There are people struggling. Everybody's got whatever they have to do in their day-to-day life. But, let's remember, we live in Canada. We live in the Western world. We still have our multiple cars. We still have televisions, and we still go to the movies. We buy books. We stream videos, etc., etc. The point I'm making here is that it's people out there are not going, I can't deal with that because I'm overwhelmed with everything else. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm
Right.
sure it does. But I think that most people, it just doesn't register. It's not that they're overwhelmed. It's just it's people living in a bubble. And this is the debate that goes on in this bubble. And then in this bubble, the people who control government and control the media, and it's a very small number of people, or who fight back against this kind of stuff. We're all in this bubble, and it's important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. It matters a great deal, but we're not even on people's radar. Okay, we're not on people's radar. With all due respect, Justin Trudeau is not on people's radar. Joe Biden is not on people's radar. Generally speaking, Klaus Schwab is not on people's radar. Generally speaking, so we're all living in this bubble and we're all fighting over this stuff, and it's important for us to be fighting over it because ultimately, what happens in this bubble will affect people, and it does affect people, but they don't realize it until it's right in their face. They don't realize that there's a problem with legislation that says that you can't discriminate against people based on their sexual gender expression. And that doesn't mean anything to anybody until they're in a change room and some guy walks in with a big beer belly, taking a shower and that in front of your teenage girls. That's where the rubber hits the road. And that's when people start to say,
So basically,
no way.
You're basically saying they're apathetic till it lands in their backyard.
Generally speaking, I think that that's the case. And I'm not criticizing anyone for it. I think it's perfectly normal. But this is, I sense, my sense is that the whole woke stuff, the whole woke movement is overreached. It's overreached.
I think you're beginning to see a lot of pushback. I think people have had enough of it. For those who are paying attention, because you're right, I think there is a large segment of the population where they just don't care. It's to put it within it's not on the radar. But then you see something like where you have Disney come out with stuff, and all of a sudden,
sure,
people sit up and take notice. When Tucker Carlson got let go, look what happened to Fox. They dropped like 56% of their audience overnight. There are a lot of people who are watching this stuff. And I don't mean to trivialize either group, but the more, let me give you a story where it doesn't matter if everybody notices. It just matters if those who matter notice.
Okay.
During the Battle of Britain, there is only 150 fighter pilots on either side combined who decided the Battle of Britain, one of the most significant air battles in history. Only 150. During the American Revolution, there was only 1/3 of the population that actually cared about the war. They weren't interested in leaving England and becoming their own state. All these times, it's not so much the rocks in the stream that matters, it's the rocks that change the current that matter. And that's I think what's important here is that while the vast majority, and I don't want to call them sheep or lemmings, they're just busy with other things. They don't read the papers. They don't listen to talk shows. They don't watch podcasts. They're being entertained when it's quiet. And at the same time, there are others out there who are making some noise, standing up and saying, hold it, this is too much. And that's when you begin to see change take place. And that's where this pushback's coming from. Just ask Budweiser.
Well, not just Budweiser. I talked about this on my show a couple of days ago, Nick. Here in Ontario, in Toronto, in Vaughan, the Catholic School Board, parents going to school board meetings now,
yep.
and basically saying we don't want any more of the LGBTQ plus agenda being pushed on our kids here in the Catholic School Board. And, people can have their own opinions one way or the other about the legitimacy of that particular movement, okay? But when you come right down to it, all right, one wonders what the point is of having a Catholic school board and Catholic schools if they're not allowed to adhere to Catholic teaching. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a very fair question. And parents now are starting to push back and say, hey, I send my kids to Catholic school because I want them to be educated in an environment that is respectful of Catholic teachings. And the parents now are starting to push back. And it's just incredible that you have parents actually having to go and fight with the school board, with their elected members who are supposed to be overseeing the operation of the board. But so that was going on last week, and they had to call the police and everything because it got a little testy, I suppose is the right word.
Yeah.
But the other thing was now I can't remember the town. I want to say Norwich, but I don't know if it might be Norwich, a county in southwestern Ontario, where the council has voted that the only flags that are going to fly in that township above municipal buildings or on municipal property are federal flags, provincial flags, or municipal flags. Nobody else's flags.
And that's the way it ought to be.
That, by the way, that's treating everybody equally.
That's
If
right.
you want equity, that's a perfect example of it. We're
That's-
not going to pick and choose who we're going to promote.
That's exactly right. That's always that is proper flag etiquette, by the way.
Right.
And the only other flag you might fly is if you had some foreign dignitary visiting. Let's say
Right.
the Pope shows up at a Catholic school. Okay,
Right.
you're going to fly the papal flag. Okay. Or if an ambassador comes to Canada, you're going to fly his national flag. So, okay, I get that part. But I think that there is clearly a double standard when it comes to, first of all, protests. I remember that protest you're talking about. But isn't it funny how those protesters, there was, I'm confusing it with another one where a bunch of alphabet soup, and I don't mean that. I can never remember the string of letters and numbers.
I understand.
Together. Okay, so the alphabet soup crowd showed up at a school, and the school board backed them and threw the people who they didn't like off the school property and defended the alphabet soup crowd. Yet at the same in the same country, in January, people who were peacefully protesting on Parliament Hill got run off by the police. Now they weren't there. The one I'm talking about with the alphabet soup crowd wasn't there as long as they were. But how come they don't get run off by the police? They get defended instead. You have people standing up for their constitutional rights, their charter rights, get run over by police horses, driven off, have their vehicles impounded, criminal charges, all kinds of stuff. And the double standard there just makes me nuts.
Well, it's we weren't planning on talking about the public service strike here in Canada, but I did make
tell you something about that. But go ahead.
I
Don't let
did
me
make
forget.
the observation a couple of days ago when I saw that they were protesting, picketing at a number of border crossings and causing havoc at some of the border crossings. So I just put out there a simple question, and that was, how long do you think it's going to take the government to invoke the Emergencies Act to clear those border crossings of the Peace Act picketers? Okay. Well, of course, it's not going to happen, of course. And I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but
yeah, I get it. But here I saw a protester at, I think it was in Ottawa, that one of the Peace Act, whatever the union is that's on strike.
It's
up
Peace
there.
Act, Public
It
Service
is
Alliance
Peace
of
Act.
Canada.
Okay, I thought so. Anyway, they held up a sign, a white Bristol board sign, and it said, "We need to eat too." And I just about exploded. Wait a minute. Now listen, I have a relative who works within the federal government. I'm not going to get any more specific than that because, best of my knowledge, that individual has nothing to do, has no interest in any of this stuff. So I'm not going to try to out anybody, but I have a good idea what that individual makes, and it's north of $75,000 a year.
Yeah.
So don't tell me that those people up on Parliament Hill who are protesting for a 20% increase in wages need to eat. They can eat already. The question is, if that's your attitude, where are you eating? What are you buying that you have to have a 20% increase in your salary so you can eat too? Tell that to the people who are going to the food banks once a week just so they can get by. Tell them that you need to eat while they pay taxes to make sure you can. Oh man, I tell you, I just about lost it. It's a good thing I was in a motel having a continental breakfast because there were other people around to keep my head from exploding. The arrogance of that was just like, oh my God.
There are certain things that I am sympathetic to in terms of what they want in their bargaining sessions, but the salary demands, the wage increase demands, are beyond outrageous.
Oh my God!
And from simply a communications point of view, I've just put the simple question out there, Nick. How do you expect to garner public sympathy when you're asking for, in some cases, one of the bargaining units is asking for 14% per year for 3 years? 14% per year for 3 years, over 3 years. Okay, I mean, you can't ask for that. You can't go on strike for that and expect public sympathy, no matter how pro labor, how pro union you are. Okay, it's nonsense, and I cannot say how profoundly I don't even know what the right word is to use here, Nick. That
It's
union
insulting.
leadership would allow the union would allow its leadership to go down this road. They are destroying whatever public sympathy that they could possibly have by making that kind of an outrageous wage.
What should happen to these people is the same thing that happened in the 1980s to the air traffic controllers in the United States.
Yeah,
That's what should happen. And for anybody who doesn't know,
Well-
Ronald Reagan fired them all.
but they already, that was an illegal strike. Okay,
Fair enough,
back-
but that's I still look. It's obscene the amount of money they want.
Okay, we're on the same page with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
let's take a break. Okay, we'll be back in a couple of minutes here on the Nick and Joe Show.
Okay. Welcome back, folks. Joseph, before you go on, I got to share with you something. During the break, I'm sitting in my friend's office, right? And there's a book laying beside me. So during the break, I picked it up and I opened it. And it's a Sears Roebuck catalog. I won't tell you the year just yet. Okay. But in here, there is a talking machine. And you get the talking machine, 25 records. It's meant for public use. So in a dance hall or something like that. It's got a great big bullhorn on it. $8.75 with 25 records to go with it. It's absolutely priceless. This was printed in 1906. I don't know if you can see it there. And
Yeah.
my, how times have
Hang on.
changed. Oh boy. There's let's see what else is in here. They got all kinds of ointments and tinctures and woman's shampoo. Princess Tonic Hair Restorer. How much is that? $1.55. Oh brother. Kentucky Foot Form. There you go. That's 59 cents. Davis Lump Jaw Cure, $1.29 for cattle. Ladies underwear, $2.55 for a full set of bloomers. Oh my God. Oh brother, that was priceless. I just had to share some of that with you. I'm looking at it going, oh man. And it's all black and white pencil drawings, right? There's not a picture in it. It's 1906. It's obviously a reprint. It's not really from 1906. Somebody just took the catalog and reprinted it in the same style. And with all this, there's everything in there. They got rifles, shotguns, horse saddles, pistols. I'm just flipping through it.
Oh.
Women's underwear, record players, you name it. I haven't seen the car yet, but I'm sure there's one in there. Good Lord.
Could you get a car? Could you get a car from Sears Roebuck? That's the interesting question.
Probably. I'll bet you probably could, because I know you could get a house from them. There was a time when you could order a house and boats and things like that. So why not a car?
I don't
Who
know.
knows? That has nothing to do with what we were going to talk about.
That's that over fertile imagination, Nick.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's remarkable. You want to talk about inflation, and I tell you what, you and I've gone over that 100 times. I don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole again. But here's a classic example. You've got a magazine here, and I wouldn't be surprised. There's a camera for $11. Brisbane's Death to Lice. Okay, so all kinds of stuff. Suit offer for $4.45. More women's clothing. Saddle blankets, musical instruments. Let's see, a EF flat bass tuba is $19. Hand saws, $4.25. The top of a buggy is $12.50. Hand pumps, the old over the cistern hand pump. They got a variety of them. One of them is $12. I mean, holy mackerel.
That was pretty expensive back then.
It was in 1906.
That's what I mean. It's it doesn't sound like much now, but for 1906, $12 for anything is a lot of money.
Well, here's malt extract for $1.42. I'm just flipping through it. Headstones. You can get headstones. I kid you not. Wood stoves. Where did the headstones go? They were here. I just flashed. Fur coats, $38. A full-size man's fur coat. Sorry about the creature that had the... Anyway, so there it is. If you want to laugh, find one of those and just flip through it and think of what $100 would buy you back then.
Okay. And now, here's the segue.
Back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Going from laughter to crying.
Uh-oh.
Oh, you're waiting for me?
Yeah.
Oh, Nick. So last week, I should say, the federal government announced that it is going to be providing Volkswagen with subsidies of up to $13 billion in order to build an EV, that is an electric vehicle battery plant, here in Ontario. And when it's built and fully operational, I am told that it will be the largest factory in Canada.
How many people will it employ?
They're talking about employing several thousand people.
You
$13
know,
billion, Nick.
this whole thing, and I've said this from the beginning, this whole EV movement to solar power, the whole environmental thing is all based on a lie. And
Well-
that's why it drives me nuts.
Well, here's the thing. I hear what you're saying about it being based on a lie. I'm not arguing that. That's a separate issue. Let's just take it at face value that there is a market for electric vehicles. Therefore, there's an electric vehicle battery market, and we want to corner the market. If this is the case, if there's a real future, if it makes good economic sense, then why is it necessary for the federal government to give Volkswagen, which is a very large multinational corporation?
Yeah, they're not Ren and Stimpy's bolted together.
Yeah, I'm not throwing stones at them for this. I'm not anti-business. I just don't understand why, if this makes good economic sense, why is it necessary for the federal government to offer subsidies? And how those subsidies are going to work, I'm not sure. Could be tax breaks, could be direct grants, could be all kinds of different things.
Or a combination, yeah.
Okay, combination thereof. So they're going to give up to $13 billion in subsidies to Volkswagen to build this plant here in Canada, in Ontario. I think it's going to be somewhere around St. Thomas or thereabouts is what they're looking at.
Yeah.
So I guess the first question, as I've already asked, is why is it necessary, first of all, for the government to be providing this kind of financial support, direct or indirect, to this corporation if this project makes financial sense? That's the first question. The second question, though, is a question that nobody is asking, and that is this. If the way to get these manufacturers to locate in Canada is to provide them with tax breaks of billions of dollars, then if you want to spur the economy, doesn't it make sense then to simply lower taxes so that you don't actually have to give targeted tax breaks? Just lower taxes. If the reason why Volkswagen is going to locate this new plant, and we'll see how that's going to materialize, okay?
Right.
Until the plant is built and they've hired the people and they're putting all of these batteries out into the market, I'm reserving judgment, okay? But if the reason why Volkswagen would locate now here is because, pardon me, of the tax breaks, if that's the incentive, then doesn't it stand to reason? Isn't it logical to make the assumption that if we just provide these incentives to everyone by cutting taxes, that more manufacturers are going to locate here? There's going to be more spending. There's going to be more consumer spending. More people are going to be working. And ultimately, the government is going to reap the benefits of that increased economic activity through increased revenue to the Treasury. So this is the thing: is everybody's focused on the subsidies and asking, should we be doing these subsidies? And that's a very good question. That's a fair question. But I think that the bigger question is, if these subsidies are actually going to work, and presumably we believe they're going to work, otherwise, why would we be doing it? Then doesn't it make sense to just make these kinds of subsidies, the tax breaks, etc., permanent instead of doing these boutique things?
Okay, I'm thinking about this from the other side. First of all, you're right. Lowering taxes not only brings in foreign investment like Volkswagen and who knows who else, but it also spurs domestic growth. You have all kinds of industries pop up to fill niches. People would feel more encouraged to go out and start either their own business or, well, their own business, provide services, whatever it is, because they know they're going to get to keep a much larger chunk of what they earn and the overall growth of all this. But on the other side, from the government perspective, and I am not under any circumstances defending or promoting this, they're going to say, yeah, but we got to save the planet. And this is how we're going to do it. And these guys are experts on building these batteries. And they lay aside all the stuff about what the batteries are made of, how you extract those minerals, why we don't get them here. There's a huge lithium deposit here in Canada. We don't need to bring it in overseas. We have enough for all the batteries they ever want to build right here. So those questions are never asked. It's like I watched CPAC the other day, and Pierre Poilievre got up and he was going after Trudeau about something, and Trudeau responded and say, "Look, they don't care about pollution. They were talking about cutting the carbon tax." And he said the conservatives don't care about the cost of pollution. They don't care about the massive forest fires. They don't care about the floods and the droughts. And I'm thinking to myself, why doesn't Pierre just get up and say, carbon dioxide's not pollution? The forest fires are from bad management held by you guys in the bush because you put an end to logging in areas you have no business being in, and just run down the list and explain why these are not to do with the environment. These are about man messing with things they have no business messing with. And yet he won't do it. They will not do it. And it's frustrating. So I see the same thing happening here. You've got Doug Ford as head of the Ontario, whether you like him or not, it's not the point. He's the premier, coming along and saying, hey, between him and I believe it's a split deal between the province and the feds, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. So you've got Trudeau and Ford standing there going, aren't we wonderful? Look what we're doing, not only for the environment, but hey, we're bringing in a major manufacturer with thousands of jobs, and I don't decry the jobs. Good Lord, I'm not against, I'm like you, I'm all for capitalism. If I'm Volkswagen, I'm taking that deal because my job is not to make batteries. My job is to make money. And I do it by building batteries and putting them out in the marketplace.
Okay, talking about the environment, let's just take a quick break, and we'll be back in just 1 minute here on the Nick and Joe Show.
We all know that climate change is real. But with countries like China and India failing to do their part, what Canadians need now more than ever is a Made in Canada climate change plan. A real plan that responds to the real-world needs of Canadians. A balanced plan that supports responsible economic growth and strengthens our essential infrastructure. A responsible plan that protects our natural environment and ensures that all Canadians enjoy the blessings of clean air, clean land, and clean water for generations to come. It's time for Canadian politicians to show real leadership in the world, putting partisanship and ideology aside. It's time for a sensible climate plan. We're the International Climate Science Coalition Canada, and we're ready to help. To learn more, visit our website, icsc-canada.com.
And we are back. You're tuned into the Nick and Joe Show. I had to think about that for a second. What is it? It's Sunday, and it's April the 30th, 2023. And Nick has just stepped away from his desk for a moment. So we've just been talking about the subsidies that are going to be flowing to Volkswagen for the EV battery plant that they are proposing to build in Ontario. Subsidies totaling somewhere in the order of $13 billion. $13 billion Canadian. Now, that's actually a lot of money. It doesn't sound, if you're watching this show, catching us down south of the border, listening to the podcast, you're thinking, $13 billion. As the saying goes, billion here, billion there. Eventually it adds up. But $13 billion doesn't sound like a whole lot. But for us here in Canada, remember, our economy is about a tenth of the size of the US economy. Our population is about the tenth of the size of the US population. So it's a big deal. $13 billion is a really big deal here in Canada. So we've just been talking a little bit about that. And I see that Nick is back. So let's bring Nick back into the studio. There he is.
There he is. Sorry for that.
That's okay. So we're just talking again about this $13 billion. And I'm just explaining, Nick, that $13 billion here in Canada, that's real money. I mean,
Yes,
it's real money anywhere, okay? But if you're watching the show from the United States, you're thinking, $13 billion? That's nothing. Our budget is trillions of dollars. Okay, well, that may be the case. But here in Canada, we have a much smaller population, much smaller revenue base, much smaller budget, much smaller economy. $13 billion is a whole heck of a lot of money. And just one more thought, Nick, and then I'll shut up and let you jump in here, okay? I can't let the occasion pass without making note of the fact that Volkswagen is the creation of National Socialist Germany.
Yes, it is.
This was the people's vehicle, the people's car was created.
Volkswagen means people's wagon.
Yeah, it's interestingly enough. Now, I'm not saying that to throw stones at anybody or to make a particular judgment call or anything like that, but one wonders, why, when you think about it. Just think about this for a second, people. I'm being told that I have to change the name of a school because it's named after Sir Johnny MacDonald.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Because of, he may or may not have said some bad things or questionable things about First Nations peoples back in the day. But here we are getting into economic bed with Volkswagen, with its origins, with its whole history. The Volkswagen played a major part in providing equipment and vehicles and that for the Nazis during the war. I'm not saying that we shouldn't deal with them. I'm merely pointing out the dichotomy, the difference in how we treat these things.
You could say the same thing about Mercedes and Porsche too.
Oh, okay. Well, since we're on this road, Messerschmitt.
Yeah, okay. There's another one.
Mitsubishi. Okay, don't forget the Japanese.
Hitachi.
Okay, so Siemens.
What about Ferrari?
I don't know about Ferrari, but Porsche for sure.
Lamborghini was a tractor manufacturer. I don't know if they go back that far.
I don't know.
Anyway, in other words, there's a lot of companies. If you were going to do this, if you were going to start changing names because somebody finds it offensive, why stop with just sports names? Why is it we have to change the Edmonton Eskimos to the Edmonton Elk? Or why do we have to denigrate Queen Victoria and Sir John A. Macdonald because they may, as you pointed out, may have said something 150 years ago that somebody today finds offensive? Well, if that's your logic, then let's scrap Volkswagen and Porsche and Mercedes and Henkel and Mitsubishi and Hitachi and Toyota and all these other companies.
Yeah, and remember, like a lot of our cars have Mitsubishi engines in them, okay?
Absolutely. So, yes, who made the Japanese fighter called the Zero?
Just think for a second, okay? We are going to ban the Confederate flag down in the United States. Okay, how many people who are in favor of banning the Confederate flag drive Volkswagen products?
That's a very good. I would love. This is when I wish you could be
like that, but it would be fascinating.
This is when I wish you could be on the street with a microphone and a camera and go up to some bozo who hasn't got a clue about history and say, "Listen, you want to ban the Confederate flag? Okay, I get that. So you're going to ban the Volkswagen car too because it has Nazi roots."
what a great thing to do is to go on the road with, as you say, a camera and a microphone, and just look for people driving Volkswagen Beetles,
Yeah.
and just go up to them and ask them what they think about the Confederate flag,
Yeah.
or a statue of Sir Johnny MacDonald,
Or pull up next to a Porsche or a Mercedes.
you know, and just it's you see, this is
We
this
could
is
have
what
so
I
much
mean
fun with this.
is the people that are pushing this wokish agenda are stupid.
There's no question about it, because anybody with a brain would realize how absolutely out of control this gets.
They're stupid, and they are profoundly ignorant of the topics that they pretend to be experts in. I mean, that's just,
You know,
I don't know what else to say about it, Nick. It's
I
just,
think we should get a hold of somebody like Matt Walsh or one of these guys down in the States that goes around and does this and suggest that question to him.
no, we should, no, I should. I know the person to do it.
Oh,
Yeah, but I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it on the show.
all right. Well, you can tell me later.
Yeah.
Because I'm dying to find out who that is. So anyway, that's this whole, first of all, this, to get back to where we started with, this whole EV thing is crazy to begin
Right.
with. And again, it's my underlying thing is if someone would just get up and tell the truth about what's driving this, because
Right.
it's not the climate.
Well, you know, and again, look, I don't have, in principle, I don't have any problem with electric cars. But on the battery side of things, well, there are two things. The first thing is, I don't believe that we should be pushing them. Number
right.
one. Number two, you know, let the free market work. It'll work itself out eventually. There's no question that, again, in principle, setting aside the battery issues, that electric vehicles probably are better for the environment. And if that's what you want to take care of, then that's fine. But there are serious problems with the batteries. And it's not just the sourcing of material to make the battery, but this is the thing. This is the other thing that I'm surprised that nobody really seems to be talking about, including on our side of these arguments of this particular debate, Nick, and that is the pending and unavoidable now environmental disaster that we are going to create when it comes time to dispose of these batteries when they reach their end of their life expectancy, number one. But that's the batteries. Don't forget, we also have to dispose of the solar panels when they reach their life expectancy as well. And all of this material is toxic material. And there is no plan whatsoever. A lot of plans to buy these materials and to install them, but there is no plan whatsoever to dispose of them safely.
Let me jump in here because there's 2 points I want to make. Number one, it's funny how the battle cry in society today is make the producers pay for the disposal. That's number one. So keep that in mind. You never hear that when it comes to environmental companies producing things like wind farms and solar panels, okay, or EV batteries. Nobody's saying that to them. Number two, we already have a track record of this kind of thing. They're called windmills. 20 years ago, when this all started, we all said, for anybody who was on the opposed this, they all said, what happens when the life expectancy of these wind turbines, which is about 20 years, reaches their potential and they're done? Who's going to take them down? And nobody wanted to go near that question. Nobody. Guess what's happening now? These wind turbines that were put up 20 years ago are now standing there rusting. Some of them are falling over. Others are catching fire. And nobody wants to accept responsibility. It always falls back on the landowner, the guy who allowed the thing to be put on his property in the first place. And they don't have the $40,000 or $50,000 it would take to rent the helicopter to take them down with, because it's not like chopping down a tree. You just don't take an axe to it and lay it down. You know, that these things, the job of taking them down is far more dangerous than the job ever was of putting them up, because you have no idea what you're in for. So we already know how this is going to go based on what happened with the wind farms.
And those wind turbines are not toxic.
Oh, the center of them is that the generator is full of PCBs.
Right. Well, so part of it is,
Yeah.
but generally, okay, they're not. It's a again, it's living in a fantasy land. It's like during the recent election campaign, I was giving a speech, and it was during a debate, and I finally I just put my hands on my head and I said, it's like I wake up in the morning and I'm in a Harry Potter novel.
Without the royalties.
Yeah, without the royalties. Yeah, nobody's paying me for this.
That's right.
It's the detachment from reality that is necessary. The degree of detachment from reality that's necessary in order to push these policies forward is again, it's, you know, who knows? 50 years ago, maybe it was enough to get people committed. I just don't know anymore, Nick. It's
you can't get committed. There aren't any institutions left.
there aren't any. It's unconstitutional.
It's unconstitutional. Get yourself committed for being insane.
Yeah.
Where do you think the politicians come from?
You can't get committed. You could just get euthanized.
Yeah, no kidding.
Welcome to Canada 2023. Nick, we got to go for another break.
All right.
Okay, we'll be back in 2 minutes here on the Nick and Joe Show.
Okay, welcome back. This is the Nick and Joe Show. I'm Nick. He's Joseph. He's there, and I'm here. All right. And
April the 30th.
April the 30th. That's right. Tomorrow's May the 1st.
May 1st is tomorrow. Yes, May 1st does generally follow April the 30th.
Yeah, well, at least.
And I'm saying that because I put it that way because um, you'd think that that's just a perfectly natural thing, but let's not forget that in the French Revolution, they actually started from year zero,
Did they?
and they divided the weeks up into 10 days, 10 days, 10 months, because they were very obsessed with the metric type of
Yeah,
system.
that worked.
And well, the metric system works. Okay, it's just a different way of
Don't get me
measuring.
started,
But
Joseph.
nobody bought into the 10 days of a week and 10 months and stuff like that.
Yeah, that put
So
you know
it's
how far away they put the weekends.
yeah, I don't even know what they were doing with weekends. I don't know, because they were they were pretty anti-church, so I don't really know what happened with the Sunday being the day of rest or whatever. But anyway, that's a perfect example of people just not buying into it. They go, yeah, okay, fine.
We should
Anyway,
have done
so
metric.
there is a historic example of the left reinventing the calendar. So it's not without historical precedence
Yeah,
that
that
we
worked out
point
really
out
well.
that May
But
1st does follow April 30th.
and I wish we'd have done the same thing with metric. They did with the 10-day week.
You guys,
It's a disaster. I was thinking about it today, and it's
it's not a
complete
disaster. Come
God's
on, Nick.
breakfast. It is so.
Listen, I don't care. I can work in the metric system. I can work in the imperial system. I grew up in imperial. I learned metric. It's easy to work with, but lots of people don't like to use it, which is okay with me because I use both. Okay. I go to the store. I buy my meat in kilos. Okay. I go to the doctor and I get my height measured in feet. They want to measure my height in feet and my weight in pounds. Go figure.
I know. How far is it when you go play golf? How far is it from the first tee to the first green?
I don't know. I don't play golf.
Measured
Well,
in yards.
but obviously, football is still in yards.
That's right. When you buy a set of tires, it's measured in inches.
That's absolutely
I know,
true.
because you just bought a set for the truck in 17-inch tires. And this is we converted the metric in 1978, for crying out loud. It's been a dog's breakfast. Anyway, it's a gripe of mine.
Well,
Air boils at
hey,
30.
when you go to pay your electric bill, they charge you for kilowatt hours.
Well, that's something we always did because
Don't
there
you know
is
that? But it's not metric.
no, that's true. It's not.
No, it's not metric.
That's right.
Metric energy, metric measurement of energy is
Joules. Yes. As a matter of fact, when Trudeau came out wanting to ban hunting rifle, he started using joule newtons or some darn thing, muzzle velocity with so much energy. And I'm thinking, what the hell is he talking about? He doesn't. Rifles are measured in feet per second and with pounds of kinetic energy on impact. That's how you do it. And just nobody knew what the heck he was talking about because nobody does that.
Yeah, when you put a boiler into a building, if it's a steam boiler, you're aiming for 15 pounds per square inch pressure.
Right. Or 550 if you're on a destroyer.
Yeah, but it's all PSI.
Absolutely. Even your tires. They try it in bars. It doesn't mean a thing to me. I have to get a pressure gauge out to figure out how much air to put in my tires. They say, well, it's 14 bar. What the hell is 14 bar?
And when when you get into your private plane, okay, and they tell you what the altimeter setting is,
it's
in inches of mercury.
And the altitude is thousands of feet. Speaking of altitude, we were looking at an airplane flying overhead, leaving a contrail. And my wife and I started to laugh because how many people believe in chemtrails? And just that's a whole rabbit hole we won't go down. But
no,
some of the nonsense people believe, as we got to do a conspiracy show one of these days and just talk about some of those outrageous conspiracy theories that are out there, chemtrails being one of them. The logistical support required to run a massive chemtrail program is simply unthinkable. You just couldn't do it. Anyway.
All right. So C11 passed Parliament last week.
Yes.
If it's not law as of today, it will be law imminently.
Yes. Thank you,
and
Pierre Trudeau.
And I am adamantly, implacably opposed to C11.
So am I. I think that the
But
last thing
but
the
it's
government
not. But it's not. But Nick, it's not. It's not a censorship bill, and it would have been so much easier for people like me to oppose the bill logically if we didn't have our allies out there calling it the internet censorship bill and talking about how we're all going to get censored on it. It is, and I saw a podcast earlier today where they were talking about, the regulations are going to end up censoring us, and I pointed out that there are no regulations. They haven't passed any regulations yet. C11 is a problem. I don't see any reason why we should have the CRTC. And for those who are not in Canada, CRTC stands for the Canadian Radio and Television Commission. And it is a government board that regulates radio and television licensing and content through licensing. I really don't know how you could possibly regulate content on the internet because there are no central broadcast things. The idea of C11 is to ensure that streaming services, etc., are providing some degree of Canadian content when they broadcast into Canada. But when people start talking about YouTube and they start talking about other things like what we're doing now, this is not covered by C11. Now, when I say this, people automatically jumped on top of me and they go, "You're defending C11." I'm going, "No, I'm not defending C11. I'm just saying that I, as committed as I am to truth in gender politics and truth in history when it comes to whether or not the Algonquin tribe ruled over this land in Ottawa for millennia, okay, being committed to truth and accuracy is not something that you get to pick and choose." And so I'm saying C11 is not about censoring content. Could it evolve into that? It could. But here's the danger, and this is where I want to go with this, Nick, is the danger of making it into the censorship bill. Now the bill is passed, so we figure, well, we've lost the battle, so nobody's going to pay attention. The real battle on C11 is not in the legislation. It's in what's going to be the regulations. And now they're going to sit down and they're going to work on the regulatory side of things. But nobody's going to be involved in this. Nobody's going to pressure anybody. Nobody's going to lobby the government because we figure we've already lost. So there are consequences to not being as precise as I'm not looking for perfection, but we need to be honest and accurate about what we're dealing with in the legislative process. And I get uncomfortable when my friends and colleagues in conservative circles are going overboard in portraying things in a manner that is not entirely accurate.
Well, I think that part of that overreaction, if you want to use that phrase, comes from, first of all, experience. From, we've seen some pretty terrible things come out of this current government, and people tend to get trigger happy and gun shy at the same time because, they always assume the worst, because so far that's pretty much what we've gotten out of this government is the worst. So don't be surprised when somebody misrepresents something because they're afraid of what the government's real intentions are. We're not mind readers. We don't know what their real intentions are, but we can base it. If you look back in history, recent history, the Emergency Measures Act comes racing to mind. Okay, no justification for that. That's been made abundantly clear, and yet he did it anyway. So if he'll ignore the law in that case, why wouldn't he ignore it in this case? And that's where I think a lot of these people tend to overreact, or maybe are a little too sensitive. They don't take the calm, steady approach you're talking about. Say, okay, rather than get our knickers in a twist, let's look at what it really says and what it means so that we can fight back effectively. What's the number one rule of combat? Know your enemy. Know, if you can, figure out what he's trying to do and make sure that you get there firstest with the mostest, to quote General George Patton. Okay, so if you look at this like that, your point of view makes perfect sense. But people, because they're afraid, tend to react viscerally from the gut, knee jerk, because they're hanging on to what they see as their. And I sometimes fall into this trap myself, and that's why I'm glad you're here, because make sure that I don't go completely overboard, because it does take some rational thought. There's an old saying you and I know quite well: panic kills, and this is the metaphorical example of that. If we overreact, we're only going to make things worse, because we won't know what we're reacting to. You cannot. You first have to assess the situation before you actually sit down and deal with it. It's like running into a room and screaming 42. Until you know what that means, you can't react.
Well, this is all very true. But the other thing that I'd point out, and Nick, is that, and we have to go for a break in about 30 seconds, but just very quickly, is that for everybody that's afraid of internet censorship, and I share that view, but what we forget is that we're already experiencing internet censorship. Look at what happened to people like Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
How many people do we know whose content has been banned
Or
first by
demonetized.
Twitter before Elon Musk took it over, but also YouTube and other platforms?
Yeah,
It's
that's true.
happening now already, and it doesn't require the government to be involved in order to do that. Nick, just hold on to that thought. We're going to go for a quick break, a minute and a half. We got 2 quick commercials to play, and then we'll be into the home stretch.
Who says you can't turn the clock back? Experience the excitement of open-air flying and see Canada's National Capital Region like you've never seen it before from the open cockpit of a vintage 1930s biplane. Are you up for the adventure? Put on your helmet and goggles and strap yourself in. Book your flight today. Go to OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. That's OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. Ottawa Biplane Adventures. The adventure begins here.
Oh my gosh, that was so exciting! I gotta do it again.
We all know that climate change is real. But with countries like China and India failing to do their part, what Canadians need now more than ever is a Made in Canada climate change plan. A real plan that responds to the real-world needs of Canadians. A balanced plan that supports responsible economic growth and strengthens our essential infrastructure. A responsible plan that protects our natural environment and ensures that all Canadians enjoy the blessings of clean air, clean land, and clean water for generations to come. It's time for Canadian politicians to show real leadership in the world, putting partisanship and ideology aside. It's time for a sensible climate plan. We're the International Climate Science Coalition Canada, and we're ready to help. To learn more, visit our website, icsc-canada.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's the Nick and Joe Show. I'm in Capel, Saskatchewan, and Joseph is in Ottawa, Ontario. Drawing a blank there for a second. So there's a few miles between us, but through the magic, through the modern technological advances we've seen in the last little while, we're able to bring our show to you no matter where we are. All right. Yeah.
We're trying anyway.
So the CRTC, the whole C11 bill, I think we kind of milked that cow dry, but to kind of sum it up, go ahead.
The other thing is this, okay, and this is, I really have to say that I do object to the whole principle of what the government seems to be trying to do here, and that is the whole Canadian content thing, and that's a big scam. I mean, that's a huge scam, because the definition of what is and is not Canadian content and what qualifies as Canadian content, like what we're doing now, Nick, okay? What we're doing now is Canadian content. But is Star Trek the original series Canadian content because it happened to have a couple of the key characters were Canadian actors? Okay, Bill Shatner and
Scotty-
who was the fellow
guy
who played Scotty?
Oh God.
Okay, but he was also a Canadian
Yes, he
actor.
was.
Okay, it's was Suits, which was a very popular
Yes.
American show set in New York. Was
Shot in
Suits?
Toronto.
Well, it was all filmed in Toronto.
Yeah.
Half of the actors were Canadian, and certainly the extras
Key
were
characters.
Canadian. And all of the studios were in Canada. The outdoor shots were in Canada. It's very funny because the building that their office was in, every now and then they do a shot from the lobby or just outside the building or whatever. It turns out that building is where some of my lawyers have their offices in Toronto. And I don't know if anyone else actually caught this, okay? But sometimes when they do these street scenes, if you pay attention in the background, I never saw Tim Hortons, but I for sure saw Rogers outlet stores. Okay.
Yeah.
So how are you promoting Canadian content, Canadian culture, I should say? Okay, when you have, just because you have a studio in Toronto, now this may be good for the Toronto entertainment business because there are people that it's a business, and here we go again, right? If providing tax breaks to entertainment companies so that they come up here and produce movies up here, if that is a good thing for business, then why not just lower taxes generally? Okay, but that's, as we were talking about earlier in the show. But it's a scam. The whole thing is a fraud from start to finish. The whole Canadian content business is a fraud.
Well, Brian Adams went through this where I can't remember all the details, but something about where he recorded a song. He wrote the song. He's Canadian. He wrote the song in Canada. It was recorded by Canadian artists, like background singers and studio players, and they mastered it, I think, in the States, because that was the best studio for that particular work that he could get a hold of.
Yeah.
And they said it was U.S. content. And
Now,
he went. I may have the story. Maybe I'll just.
Is Brian Adams the guy that does Born in the USA?
No, that's Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, that's Bruce Springsteen.
Brian Adams does cuts like a knife.
Okay.
So yes, he's very much Canadian. I think he's from the West Coast. He might be from Vancouver, but
Well, is
Shania Twain is another one.
Celine Dion, when somebody does a concert of hers from Las Vegas, is that Canadian content or not Canadian content?
These are all questions they don't have answers to, or when they do give answers, they don't make any sense.
So
Because
this
I
is
think, as you're pointing out, if the content produced is good enough, okay, if it meets the international standard, people will buy it no matter where it comes from. Look at the Red Green Show. That was syndicated.
we're going to bring that one up.
Was. What's that?
I knew you were going to bring him into this
Yeah,
conversation.
sure. Why not? He's a great Canadian success story. Over 20, I think it was 24 countries he was syndicated in. Did he need the blessing of the CRTC for that? Look at the series that Jason Momoa made in Newfoundland. I forget what the name of it was. Frontier, I think it was. It was about the fur trade back in the 1700s. It was shot, there were some scenes shot in Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec, up in the bush in Newfoundland, all over the place. Jason Momoa is not Canadian. Does that mean the show's not Canadian? How do you slice that pie?
The thing is this. We're expanding our conversation here a little bit, but let's look at the CBC.
Oh,
if you go to CBC television, okay, and you on any given night look at the primetime programming, you will find that a lot of the programming on CBC has nothing to do with Canada. It has nothing to do with Canadian subjects. It has nothing to do with promoting Canadian culture, Canadian politics, Canadian history. It's all American. Now, in fairness, the CBC carries more Canadian content than maybe the CTV does, but CTV is the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's how do you have regulations that are requiring Canadian content? Okay, but most of the good primetime shows that you watch on these Canadian networks are in fact not Canadian content at all. And that's not a reflection of regulations that are not strong enough. That's a reflection of what people want to watch.
Yeah.
People want to watch these shows.
You and I both know a guy who is an unbelievable guitarist. He's probably one of the best guitarists I've ever heard. And he and I had a conversation about this one night, and he said what this does by having the CBC or the CRTC promote Canadian content, they keep a lot of crappy garbage art on the air or in the studios simply under the banner of Canadian, because record radio stations have to play 30% Canadian content or something like
Whatever
that.
it is.
Whatever the number is. And he said the only reason they play some of this stuff because it meets their whatever their criteria is for Canadian, but it's not good enough to be picked up by anybody else. Nobody else wants to listen to it. The only time you'd ever hear it is on a radio station like the CBC or a Canadian broadcaster who has to meet that standard. Take that standard away, and a lot of garbage goes away, and the good ones rise to the top. And that's how you promote Canadian content, is by allowing them to compete on even footing with everybody else. Because it'll bring the best out in them.
Presumably.
Kind of like
Or
Toronto
it
Maple
won't.
Leafs.
Or it won't. But look, bottom line is this, okay? We don't need the government telling us what we should be watching or what we should be listening to. If it's good, we'll listen to it. If it's not, we won't listen to it. Everybody has their personal tastes. And, the funny thing is that other countries around the world don't feel the need to do this in order to promote their own culture either. All this does is it not only promotes poor quality stuff, forces us to digest poor quality entertainment stuff, but it also, as with all things that the government puts its fingers into, increases the cost to consumers. Okay, and it's just another example of do-gooders just deciding what's in our best interest for us. And this is the problem with C11. It's the censorship thing is not the problem. The problem with C11 is in principle. Does the government have a role to play in telling us what we should be watching or not watching, not based on content per se, like what we're doing here now, but based on whether it's Canadian or not Canadian?
Or if even if it suits the government's current agenda.
Well, okay, yeah, but that gets into the whole censorship question.
That's true. That's true, and you're quite right about it's already being done. Well, you could say that if you look at what's been going on in the States between Twitter and Biden and all that sort of thing, that the government goes to the media platforms and tries to help them forward their own agenda.
Nick, I don't want to get into detail on our show. But you and I both know, Nick, that our show has been banned from certain networks already.
That is true. And it's unfortunate, but
because of the content.
Mm-hmm. Or the perceived content.
Or perceived content.
Yeah.
So it's happening already. And guess what? That's the nature of the beast when it's private industry, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, on the one hand, you say you don't want the government to censor anything. On the other hand, there are people out there that are saying, but we need the government to step in to make sure that everybody has fair opportunity to broadcast on private networks. It's a problem on both sides.
Well, I don't hold any I don't hold any bad blood towards the platform that we are no longer part of, and I'm being vague on purpose.
Yeah,
You know, it's a private platform, and just like when you go to work for a private firm, they have the right to hire or fire anybody they want to, whether or not you agree with that includes, like when I was a CFRA, it was a private company. They hired me, and they fired me, and all I could say was thank you for the opportunity. It's not about, whether or not I thought I was being unfairly treated, or in this case with this platform, whether they understood what was going on in the background. It was that particular platform's complete and total right to do what they did, and we knew that
absolutely.
going in. So
So do you want the government to step in to protect your quote unquote free speech rights?
no, but
Well,
I don't
all
want
I'll
the
say
government
is
telling me
be
I can't
careful
do the
what you
same
wish
thing.
for.
I just want the government to tell me I have the right to do the same thing. That if I
Okay.
want to set up a platform that other people don't agree with, they're certainly free not to agree with me, but don't tell me I can't do it.
Well, and you can.
Yes, at the moment we can.
Okay. Um, another exciting 1 hour and 53 minutes.
Yeah, well, the first few minutes was really exciting due to the
Okay.
technical difficulty I ran into.
All right. No problem.
All right.
All right, guys. This is me, Joseph, saying thanks for tuning in. We're going to catch you next week here on the Nick and Joe Show. And over to
We
you,
s-
Nick.
we certainly will, and it'll be on time and on budget. In the meantime, I wish you all a great week. Look forward to seeing you again at the regularly scheduled time and place. So with that, I'll sign off and say, Ubi Caritas et amor, Dea sibi est. Good evening, God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind and a following sea.